Good morning, and thank you to you, all of you who got up to join us this morning. We really appreciate it. It's a great commitment, and it's been a great and incredible commitment this year to be part of Art Basel Hong Kong and to be delivering this show. I'm so pleased to be here with 5 of the incredible artists from the exhibition: Stanislava, Pinchuk, Trevor Yeung, Mella Jaarsma, Carlos Ares, and Awol Erizku. Let's give them a big round of applause for getting up this morning. Look, what we're going to do today is we're going to try and tell you, what's not fit for print, what you might not necessarily read on the internet or in the press release. We're going to try and have a conversation together. I'll have a conversation with each of the artists about their work. I'll give you a little bit of a context as to how Encounters came together this year, and then I'll speak with each of the artists, and there'll be a chance for you to ask questions. It'd be lovely to have a conversation together. This is my 8th year curating the sector for Art Basel Hong Kong, and my 6th edition. I don't think I've had a year where I've had such a deep personal connection with each of the artists, because the stakes felt very high this year. When I was in 2019, I was sitting in this room with Stephanie Bailey, the curator of Conversations, and we looked at each other and we said, wow, that was amazing. We'd done this for 5 years, and we looked at each other and we thought, this show, we've got to a level that we feel so proud of, that we know that Hong Kong and communities are collaborating together and that we can do something extraordinary with this platform. And we were so excited to come back in 2020. And I'd curated the sector for 2020, and then 5 weeks out from show, the world changed. The show was cancelled. We all had to retreat to our corners. We all had to learn about different ideas of care, of pause, of isolation, of community, and we all had to reflect, and we all had to take our own experiences and understand how we could have empathy for others, understanding the deep vulnerability of the social, cultural, and political context of the environments in which we were living. I think for me, Art Basel said, when we do our first international show again, we'd love you to come back. And I was like, absolutely, when visitors can come back to Hong Kong, count me in. And I didn't know when the phone call would come, but it came in October last year. And usually in October of the year before show, with March, 5-6 months out, we'd be finalizing everything. This year we were beginning, like nothing. It was the very start. And that was one of the most extraordinary experiences, and I'm so proud of the team here at Art Basel Hong Kong. The office is led this year by Angel Xiang Li, the new director. She's been on team since 2012, and the team has really risen to the occasion, and I really believe in ethical leadership and in processes of care and accountability. And I love the team here because they work that way. So what I did was I got on a plane. They said, we want you to go to Paris Plus, the new Art Basel, and so I got on a plane and went to Paris Plus, and I got there and I began to look at the galleries, and someone said to me last night, the galleries always try to look away when I look at them because they know what I'm going to ask. And so the curated sectors for Art Basel, and I'm going to just give you this context before I speak to the artists because it's important in understanding why they're here. But all the curated sectors for Art Basel are curated by curators who come from not-for-profits, foundations, museums, or alternative spaces. Unlimited is curated by Giovanni Carmine, the director of St. Gallen in Switzerland. Parcours in Basel is curated by Samuel Leuenberg, the founder of Salts. Miami, Meridians, is curated by Margali from Humex. I'm the director of Art Space in Sydney, so I have a job. I lead a publicly funded non-collecting institution in Australia. And to be able to participate as an artist in Art Basel Hong Kong in one of the curated sectors, your gallery must be participating in that fair. And so Art Basel was just confirming the galleries for the fair in October. So I had to go and find the galleries, and people kept saying to me in Paris, what's the future for Hong Kong? They would look at me kind of like my grandmother, a little judgmental. Oh, what's the future? What's going to happen to Hong Kong? Oh, Hong Kong. And I was just like, you know what? There's a war 4 hours away in Ukraine. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen with Giorgia Meloni as the Prime Minister of Italy, where I've been working on the Venice Biennale? I might tell me about that. I might tell me what happens when that former president who's just about to be charged gets re-elected. I was like, tell me what happens then. Because I can't tell you the future, but I can tell you that resilience, persistence, showing up, participating, and holding space will allow forms of the past to come into the present to create different futures. And that's what these 5 artists really do in their works. And so, I came back to Hong Kong in October 2022. And I saw that the city was alive. I saw M+. I saw Sahanya took me on a 5-hour tour of every doorknob and light fitting. She was so happy someone was here. I went to Empty and I saw kids performing noise, Annika's grindcore crust. And I'm like, while the kids are making noise, we're okay, you know? And I'm like, Art Asia Archive had been renovated. Hong Kong is an engine room and a memory bank for artists and ideas in Asia. And this is the right city for this project. So I went and saw all the Hong Kong galleries, and I'll begin with Trevor Yeung, because Trevor, it was so important to me when I began curating Art Basel Hong Kong 8-9 years ago. In my first year, I got 56 proposals, only 3 were for women, and there was none for Hong Kong artists. And, you know, over the years, I would go to the galleries and I would say, I want women, I want LGBTQI, I want full representation. I want artists from Hong Kong. I want artists from across the region. I want early career through to very established. And I really want to work with the galleries as collaborators. I work a lot with commissioning to create new works that can be seen in different ways. And I went to the Hong Kong galleries and I met with every single one of them here. And Trevor and I have been friends for maybe 8 or 9 years since Singapore, when he interned on the Singapore Biennale with my very dear friend Russell Storer over a decade ago. And Trevor, his works for me are really a kind of catalyst of the moment that we live in. They speak about intimacy and forms of vulnerability. And this work, Mr. Cuddles Under the Eve, actually premiered. I'm not going to read their bios. I think that's what Google is for. So, you know, I will just say that, you know, Trevor has been selected for the Uli Sig Art Prize at M+, announced this week as one of the 6 finalists. He's showing works in major institutions globally. He's an artist who is really going to shape a kind of language and participates at a strong level with other artists, and has a beautiful work in M+, in the Mythologies exhibition at the moment, curated by Inti Guerra and Chantel Wong. So, you know, a really great young Hong Kong artist living out in Fo Tan, where I come and hang out in his studio and really enjoy his hothouse garden that he cultivates with his gemstone and crystal collections. But Mr. Cuddles Under the Eaves, can you tell us a little bit about where this work opened and the journey of this particular work to this time?
Yes, thank you. Oh, yes. At first, I mean, I'm very happy to be, to work on this together with all other artists with all amazing work, and thank you for Alexie for, I think the first introduction is when I have a solo booth in the Discovery long time ago, that you come to me and we have an introduction. I think this is the start of everything, and I'm happy that I'm still to keep doing things, making work that I believe and I want to share with people. And particularly for Mr. Cuddles, it's a series that I have been doing since 2019. So actually it's a work that is firstly is about how we feel that kinds of powerlessness of being staying at home waiting for the typhoon to be gone, because this is something that we always not always happen, but it happens from time to time in the summer or close to the autumn, that when the typhoon hit Hong Kong, that we have to stay, because of the typhoon number 9 or 10, that we have to stay in a safe place. But previously, because they don't have that much of strong typhoon before, some seldomly, but there's one in 2018 is super strong, and it kinds of everyone aware that kinds of the power of the typhoon, that we are a little bit we feel cannot fight for the typhoon, because what we are doing is we stay at home. We use the tape to protect the glass under the window, and then we just wait until the next day. Then people go back to work, and in 2019, I made a show with a gallery in Paris. So actually, this work is not showing in Hong Kong first. The first one is in Paris, because I want to bring this kind of feeling to other places. But at the same time, maybe not a lot of people, they know the feeling of typhoon. So I think this is a way to get close with other people. But after 2019, which is the COVID, the pandemic, and I aware that because everyone have been we experienced the lockdown, or you have the quarantine, you have to stay at home, or that kinds of waiting for something that to go or to finish, that get back to their normal life, is kind of weird, and you feel like you're suspending. And so that's why when I choose the tree, that is a tree that is like, actually they are like 7 trees that they like braid together. And somehow if you put it on the floor, you don't feel that kind of like tension between each other. But when you are quarantined, or when you are locking down with your family or with your partner, you feel that kind of tension of each tree, like kind of like pressing each other when you are hanging. So I think this is somehow that for this work, I want to, I guess everyone will feel that kind of connection. Yes.
I mean, I have to say, I have been in Hong Kong for Typhoon Days Off, and I've been in Taipei for Typhoon Days Off, when you're in the buildings and everything's moving, and that feeling of the kind of architecture in the city moving around your body, and those elements and airs, and that then becomes an allegory for other forms of waves and riptides, you know, socially and culturally, that move within and around us, both within our interpersonal relationships, but also more broadly and globally.
Yeah.
And this work, you know, a work like this, you have shown the money trees before in different locations, and there's some of the money trees at Tai Kwun at JC Contemporary. But here, this is an inverted pyramid. It's like a 7-meter structure with the 13 trees, and the work actually opened, and the lowest tree can be touched by the audience. And I'm a short person, so we've hung it to my height. And, you know, this work actually premiered in the Ukraine in September 2021, when you were part of the Pinchuk Art Prize in Kiev.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about going and installing that work, and what happened with this work to bring it here?
And I mean, I think when I got the, when I was shortlisted and knowing that I have to go to Ukraine, I think I'm also very lucky to be part of that. And I think at that moment, because we have been experienced, like we cannot really travel, and even though for me, when I go there, I have to, I stay there for 7 days, and I have to come back to Hong Kong to do a 2 weeks quarantine. But I think it's totally worth it, because I think I didn't go to Europe for like 2 years, and there's something that is very special, the particular for, I mean, about the work. The work is more like, oh, it's a moment that I want to find a connection with people. But when I go to Ukraine to understand, I mean, because normally when I work in like more the Paris side, or like Berlin, or like other places. But when I go to Kiev, I think it's a very beautiful place that I feel a lot of like, it's like a place that is like growing. Like I was there only for 7 days, but like my setup is quite pretty smooth, so I only stay for the setup for 3 days. Then I was like walking around the city, amazing food, amazing people. I mean, I always love food, but the people out there is so like they are in a way that they are very helpful to be. When I go to different places, people are so friendly, and I feel that kind of energy in the city, and all the people are setting up the show, because we here, when we set the show, it's very good that they have the system of like going up and down, but we have a structure that we all have to carry the tree and climb up to like 5 meters to install the tree on the ceiling, and everyone is so, but I mean, it's also because my English is not that good, and they are also not that good. So in a way that we have a lot of like, because the people in the setup, they are very young. They are like 18 or like 70. They are so like interested or what all the artists are doing in there. And I remember the next day after the opening, I saw a big queue outside the Pinchuk Art Center that people are going in to see the artwork, and that made me so impressed, because I wish that can happen in many other places, have that kind of like motivation, or the hungry of looking for something that different and new.
And I think that was something that was so important, Trevor, because you were Blindspot Gallery, who show you here in Hong Kong. You know, they're really a great gallery that's working locally and internationally, really directly with artists. And Mimi, the director, was really supportive of us making this project. And I wanted this work, you know, it was meant to close on the 27th of February last year. The war broke out on the 24th. It was never, you know, they deinstalled in May last year.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of surprising, because we all didn't expect that would happen. And at the same time, because my work is a plant, so when they are, because after I see the news, I was texting everyone that I know from the art space, like how's the situation? Are they safe? Are they going to somewhere that is it affected? And then they are all safe. And even the the project coordinator who helped me to set up the things together, he joined the defense force right afterwards. So I was like, but I feel like I cannot do anything in a way that, but just seeing his last online time or like to check like how is him. But in a way that as the work handing on there, I feel that kind of a connection in a way that even I'm far, but my work is there handing with them. But at the end, because I was expecting, oh, probably people would not have time to water because they are hanging, so you have to water it every week. So I was thinking, okay, it's a way that to feel that kind of connection with each other. And I think, but at the end, after 2 months, when people going back, but I mean, after like almost like 2 months when we're going back, and I asked, is everything okay? Is the building okay? Is the tree okay? And they said, oh, the tree actually is fine. They are survived in a way that I asked them to show me the pictures, and they said, oh, they are a bit weak. They don't want to show it. And when they take it down, they take pictures, and I think, oh, it's kind of moved in a way that like they are still surviving in a way.
No, I think, look, I think, Trevor, because we wanted the work to be here, and Stan, Stanislava, look, I think with this work, Trevor, and with Stan, for both of you, I'm just going to come over. We can give you, do you want to come and swap with Carlos? Come sit with me. Would you mind swapping with Stan for me? Come sit with me. Come sit with me. Come sit here. And we can just hold some space. But look, I think the thing is that we wanted this work to be here in Hong Kong because there's a huge amount of grief as well in this city and this place about whether we would able to be here together again either. And there's places that, like you are born in the Ukraine, you came to Australia, you've now left Australia again, and you're living in Sarajevo. And, this is very personal. And these projects this year are very personal, and they are very, when I said to you at the beginning that this year has been a very different year, holding space for the 5 of us has been a very different experience. And I was speaking yesterday with my daughter about grief and hope, and feeling in Art Basel Hong Kong this year, the theme of Encounters is this present moment, because being present together is a gift. It's not something that can be taken for granted. And any moment only exists as the accumulation of the pasts that we're prepared to bring with us that can inform different futures. And seeing and holding one another has been very important. I'm going to ask you a question. Would you like to go next? Would you like me to go to Mella and come back to you?
Oh, yeah, let's go.
Should we have a conversation about the wine dark sea?
Sure. Yeah, pardon me. I mean, it's a heavy morning, and every day is hard in Ukraine. Today was a hard morning. Another attack on an apartment block. But we always go onwards, so yeah.
You've made a work called The Wine Dark Sea, which is a really beautiful 73-piece installation of a series of texts. You lived in Australia for a period of time, which is where I'm from, the unceded sovereign lands of First Nations people, and we have great privilege to work on that land and country and to learn. And Australia, I get asked in Hong Kong, are there things you can't talk about? And I don't ever talk as a curator about other people's context because that's not my job. But I can talk with artists who can speak about where they come from and what they know. And I can speak about Australia. And I can speak about Australia's human rights violations, which were really manifest with the creation of 2 mandatory detention centres in the Pacific Islands around 2012 of Manus and Nauru, with an agreement our government made to undertake a policy that they call Turn Back the Boats, which is to turn back people seeking asylum. The only thing these people have done wrong is to try to escape their homes, to try and leave persecution, to try and find safety and refuge in Australia. And the government denies them that basic human right. It is a war crime. And those camps are an absolute blight on Australia's history and our current history and present. There was a tranche of more than 2,500 documents that were released online, which were redacted telegrams, missives from the Australian government, documenting the stories of detainees living in these detention camps. And Stanislava read all 2,500 of them. That's an abstract number. And I don't laugh because it's just so crazy. It's absurd. But she matched them together. She realized that in the texts there was this language which actually was echoed through Homer's Odysseys, what she considers the ultimate tale of migration. And so she went through Odysseys and she read Odysseys in its original translation. She read, Odysseys as children's versions, and she found line upon line. And on her 76-piece installation of stone, where you read redacted, it's actually it's the telegrams themselves. And where you read it's the Home Odysseys, and where you read the texts, it's the telegrams. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Because you studied philosophy, you didn't study art. You come out of an amazing kind of body art tattoo culture, which I love, and you have this way of working with energy and metals and place.
Yeah. I mean, I think to work with the body as in tattooing, and these sculptures for me here are bodies. And the way that Alexie interpreted them in her installation of them is they are the kind of bodies stacked with heads and shoulders, and they're also like graves, a grave for the body, a tomb, and we washed them and we cared for them exactly the way that you would for a body, before we installed them. So the process of the work was reading all 2,000, I think 300 and something cables that were released by a very brave whistleblower of condition reports of what was happening to migrants in Australia's offshore detention camps. And with that, I read multiple translations of Homer's Odyssey into English through time, as I mentioned, as theatre plays for children, in prose and poetry. And what to me is, this is really a love letter to Homer. It's not a cynical work or an ironic work. It is a kind of an interrogation that, we think Homer's Odyssey is like the ultimate, quote-unquote migrant novel when you think about this genre of literature and its truths and its contrivances and its cliches and, its easy crutches and, kind of difficult metonyms, I guess. And so it was kind of interesting to me in pulling out identical lines was saying how kind of timeless this kind of trope of migration really is, and how we accept Homer's Odyssey as a kind of peak of, one of our great works of global literature, one of its great foundations, and yet we refuse to accept the narrative that is in front of us, but yet the line is the same.
And I think those, something that you and I have talked about is cycles of eternal return, and that you can't escape these cycles through time of exile, of displacement, of subjugation, of subordination, of rejection, and that we have an accountability to see. And I love this installation. It has a beautiful feel to it. It does feel like, you call it an anti-monument, and you touch the stones. They're in pinks and yellows and reds, and they feel like blood and skin and earth. And moving them together in the show, the work has been collected by a museum, which is amazing. We'll go to a museum in China and stay together. And I really love that this work has actually found a place to stay here in this place, in this time. And I'm really so proud of this work. I met with you in Paris last year, and you were the first artist I asked to participate in Encounters, and your gallery, Yavuz, really stepped up to support the commissioning of this brand new work, and so thank you. And then I suppose with that I might come to you, Mella. You've been showing up every day, dear Mella. Almost. We've got you off the clock this morning. Mella, I don't know, just for me, is like one of my favourite artists of Southeast Asia. Born in the Netherlands, but living in Indonesia now for over 40 years. almost 40 years in Yogyakarta, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, in my mind, bracketed by Borobudur and Prambanan, where she established the Chimedi Art Foundation, which had such an impact for me as a young curator through its residencies and support, and the ways in which artists in Indonesia support other artists, and the way that community operates to build strength and capacity. But in your practice, you're often dealing with ideas of subjectivity, performance, incremental incursions, interruptions into the familiar through idiosyncrasy, the surreal, and the unexpected. Can you talk a little bit about your kind of performance and durational work and how you think about working in cities, places, and spaces? It's a big question, but I know you can do it.
Thank you, Alexie. Thank you for being here. It's a great opportunity. Yes, my work always very much starts from the question, what is the function of the art? And I'm just happy to sit here with all of you where it's so clear that art can contribute something to this world, you know? I mean, how emotional it is to talk about it now, but I mean, so yeah, I decided to study in Indonesia in '84, so I moved there. And my main aim to move from the Netherlands to Indonesia was actually because life is so close with the arts, or art is so close with life, and this direct reflection of living there inside your studio, outside your studio, and what is going on, and how art can somehow contribute to make the world a bit better, or to arise questions, or to think about the main discourse, the main rules from education or religion and so on. So I think like this free space which art offers for me is always very important. And when I set up an art space together with my husband in 1988, that was also the main aim, just to create a space for people to come and to connect. And I think, this is just the basic of our existence, to interact and to discuss and then to develop things where you wanted to develop. So the first 10 years I lived under the dictatorship of Suharto. And of course it was limited in the sense that what you can show, especially political artists, but it's just so interesting period of time as well, because the artists really could deal with this sort of self-censorship that they had to do, or existing censorship, but also self-censorship, of course. And then what happened after Indonesia became more a democracy, 25 years ago, and this whole process. And then also how the art actually changed of commending on the system in that time in during the regime, and then how it develops and how artists became part of the developments and also question their role as artists in the society. So with our art space, we just try to contribute to that development. So we had a lot of space for conversations, for not only exhibitions, but also later on we started, especially when the art market became so dominant, we started with residencies to give a balance for artists to think again what they really wanted to do.
And in a sense, Mella, you're doing a residency this week here at Art Basel Hong Kong with your particular work that we've commissioned with Road Projects. Jun, who's amazing, who I just adore. I saw him in Paris in October at Paris International, and I'd been asking him for a few years if I could work with you here in Hong Kong. And he's opened a new space in Jakarta while there's been COVID. Amazing, like new galleries have opened. And he had a big show with you, and he felt more confident to come to you and ask if we could do a project here together in Hong Kong. And the project we're doing is a project where you ask bamboo construction workers to see you as a building. And it's a series, in a sense, of accumulative portraits that began on the first VIP day, but will not actually be complete until the final public day. And with Art Basel Hong Kong, we didn't know if we would have caps on numbers, limits. I wanted the public to be able to see everything. I didn't want this idea of exclusivity. I wanted things that could find form and meet people in different ways. And this work, can you tell us a little bit about the collaboration with the local bamboo construction workers and the costumes in this performance?
Yes, but especially particularly this work, I think it's interesting to bring it to Basel because, like as you can see on the images, the first time I did it was in 2008 as part of a bamboo festival in the outskirts of Yogyakarta. And for me, it's interesting to have like the differences in locations and what the work does to the local public. So to bring it to Art Basel Hong Kong, it becomes just a different work. And yeah, I'm very happy that this kind of format also changed in that sense that we have 5 days of building. And I think the connection with the workers and also to give the honor to the workers. So the title is the constructor, so it's not so much about the artist or me standing there as a building, but the workers, they are creating, and I give them the trust that they can create the shape that they want to create, you know. So of course the first construction that they made is sort of still stiff and very square, and then the second one they already more creative and more loose, and they more dare to do different shapes. So I really love that development. So to have that collaboration with other people, for me, is very important.
And every day at 1 p.m., if you go to encounter number 8, which is where Mella is located on level 3, you'll see the performance happening. You'll see the occupation of the space. And I think occupying space and holding space and presence is really a strong kind of concept that I wanted to explore this year. And this work does that so beautifully. And then Carlos Ardes, down the end here. You're another encounter on show floor here at Hong Kong Convention Exhibition Centre. And I got a call. You're, a fantastic artist based in Spain, living in Madrid, working for, many years with an amazing practice. And Sabrina Amrani Gallery, I saw her in Paris as well. And Yal, her partner in the gallery, reached out to me and they said, we have this project. It sounds crazy. What do you think? It's going to be like a ton of cash on the floor of Art Basel Hong Kong. And I was like, yeah, it kind of sounds great. I love to do stuff that just sounds like, what would that look like? And you told me this story, Carlos, that when you were a student in Spain, you were on the street one day and you picked up a garbage bag and it was full of shredded euros. And it was just left on the street in the rubbish. The banks don't know what to do with it after they shred it, after deaccessioning it, taking it out of circulation. They just couldn't deal. They can't deal with the waste. So they leave it on the streets with the garbage to be taken to landfill. And you picked up some bags and you took them with you and you moved to Belgium and you took the bags with you and you would use the cash over about 10 years till the cash ran out. And then, and now you've got, you went to, a bank in Europe for this particular project. We didn't know if we'd get permission. And you asked them for a ton of cash. And we got a crate of approximately 8 million shredded euros. But it looks like a sand dune. It looks like a corpse. It's called like Tears in the Rain. Can you talk a little bit about, the material of this work, the concept of this work, and how kind of 30 years of practice and this material have led you to this particular place?
Yes, I love the fact that all came from a casualty, just getting drunk one night when you are 19 years old and jumping on top of a big bags in front of a bank. They were soft, and one of them opened, and then you say, what is this? And this money. Now the bank that gave me this material told me that this will not be possible right now. Now they don't throw the garbage on the street, especially this type of garbage. And that stays in my head during a long time because it's just a paper that even many people doesn't know, even people from the bank that today, these days they have been here working in the bank, that many people doesn't know that to break a banknote is almost illegal in every country, just to tear it down. I saw when I was living in Belgium, I read a news, the singer Saint Gainsbourg, he on television burned, I think there were 5,000 French francs. And then I read he got a fine, and I thought, as an act of protest, and I thought, wow, this is great. This piece of paper that we forget that it's just a piece of paper that we have given a value, even if you own it is never yours, if you think twice about it, it's something very absurd about it. And that is something I really love about it. And especially even here when people see the installation, most of the people don't realize what it is. And then when you tell them it's money, completely switch oh wow, it's 8 million, and the main question is how much money is here. You know, this is everybody's question, and of course we have estimate around 8 million. I think that should be probably more, because now the biggest banknote, that is the 500, is being removed. That probably there are a lot of them there, and something that I quite love about the piece that always come in very far is the fact that this is money that has been passing through many hands. We are living now in a moment that everything is aseptical, disinfected. You know, now one of the biggest enemy is invisible. You know, we became in this kind of paranoia of any fluid, even to hold hands here, or to kiss. You know, in Spain we always kiss. I have to think it twice if you do or not, because you know you get very strange reaction. And the fact that these pieces of money, these pieces of paper, they have been running through many hands, and it's almost like a huge virus in the middle of the fair. I love it. You know, it's like
I have to say that.
no, not really. You know, like, but it is, when I say it is not. But the fact that it is used money. It's used, and now it's shared, cut it in pieces, and we have been like, I think you saw it. One of the nicest part of the piece is the days before we made it. We were like 15 people. The bank cut the papers, and then they compacted in small bricks.
Some here if you want to pass it around.
Yeah.
Who would like to? You can have a look at the money.
This is how the money came. It's just compressed in small bricks without any glue, and then we have been making it loose again. Like we were like many hours. It was quite tiring after a while.
Something though, Carlos. I mean, it was amazing. I was joking up back in the green room before. There's a drinking game called Never Have I Ever, and never have I ever broken 8 million euro on the floor of Art Basel anywhere. And now that I know that we've got these shreds of euro that will forever live in the DNA of the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, and will never be able to be eradicated. It's quite beautiful. And you know, someone said to me yesterday, you know, how do you stop artists making art about COVID? And no artist I know is making art about COVID. You know, and historically, people don't make art after plagues, about plagues. Historically, they make quite a bit of art during it, but as soon as it finishes, they go into a sort of state of disassociation and denial, and it becomes something that we never speak of again. And so I do love that this work is here as this kind of, you know, almost this parasite, this kind of molecular, but also we have a problem with money. Right? We have lots of problems. We have lots of problems with equity. We have lots of problems with decentralization. We have lots of problems with the absence of equity in terms of economic and systems of capital that preclude and suppress and deny particular people and the levels of the inequitable distribution of currency. But we actually have a money problem with sustainability because money is not sustainable environmentally. Euros are filled with metals. They can't be burnt. They can't be buried. They can't become landfill. They're still working out ways to recycle money. So essentially your June, this landscape, is a kind of portrait of an environment where not only can we not deal with the realities of economic neoliberalism and global inequities around currency and value, but also we can't actually deal with the issues of sustainability and in the environment in relationship to actual money itself. You know, we've got this thing, and the bank offered to give you they've offered you a ton of money every year because they're so keen to see someone do something with it, because they, you know, don't want to be able to sending it to landfill. But it looks like ashes or a corpse as well. It feels like a funereal, it has a sense, you know, all these hands that it's passed through, the millions of people whose lives made contact, you know, and that they then come here and find form on this plinth. It's a really beautiful work in the way that it washes up. But just the title of the work comes from Blade Runner. Yeah,
it comes from Blade Runner. And it's funny because Blade Runner was much inspired in Hong Kong. I mean, it's supposed to be LA in 2020 something, but it's very much inspired in Hong Kong, and of course I think it's one of the most beautiful monologues in cinema history, because he a replicant, he say, you know what is to live in fear, and that is to be a slave. And I thought that was a great relation with capitalism. And then when he say, all this will be vanished like tears in the rain, time to die. And I thought that gave a good twist to the piece, because you're right, for me it has something like ashes. It looks like sun, but there is something quite funerary about it. And when I was talking about the virus, I was not talking in a literal way. The fact that during the making process, many people from Art Basel was getting crazy about, all the workers, we were full of those pieces of paper that they were going around, and the fact that these pieces is a confetti too. There is some kind of confetti feeling about the piece. And all those things together, the fact that those little pieces of money will be staying here in any corner, I love it.
You did tell me, and I'll move on to Awol because you mentioned LA, but it was recently Pride in Australia, World Pride, happened in Sydney on my front doorstep, and I would get up every morning and the glitter and the feather boas were ground into the tar. And, you were telling me about coming out as an artist and your kind of journey coming out, not as an artist, coming out in your life and, your own relationships with LGBT, QI communities. And I love that this work has that kind of confetti feel, that it's the confetti that's kind of just fallen. And I have to say with, Stanislava, Mella, Trevor and Carlos, what I love about Art Basel Hong Kong here in the convention centre after 8 years is that audiences are really mature and up for the conversation and up for the challenge. A work like Trevor's 8 years ago, people would have just read it as a one-liner, but now they actually see that the work is more layered. And I really love that the audience, artists have been making work about money for over 100 years, from Warhol through Broadhurst, money is well-trod. And, but your work, Trevor's work, working with, the money trees themselves, Mella's work working with the bamboo construction, your work working with the marble and, the process of construction and the layering of text. Audiences are up for this encounter. But this year we thought, well, since audiences are really up for the encounters here in the fair, let's take an encounter off-site, Awol, Erizku. Let's do that, mate. And so in October last year when I came back to Hong Kong, Art Basel said to me, we've only got 6 months to do what we've never done before, to make the entire show, to curate large-scale installations, to deliver the fair, and look, could we also add in a public project? And I was kind of like, all right, let's do that. And I didn't know. I said, if I have a good project, we'll do a public project. And I visited with every Hong Kong gallery, and I can see Ben Brown here. And I went to Ben Brown Gallery, and Amanda said to me, Awol Erizku, whose work I knew, has made this 10-meter king tut that was meant to show in Hong Kong in 2020, but was never able to be seen. And would you be interested in it for Art Basel Hong Kong? So we did a secret inflation at the Jockey Club last November when I was here in Hong Kong. And it looked amazing from the hills, and you could see it. And, I just thought this can't be here in the fair, because if it's in the fair, you'll just see it from the ground. And you actually need like a perspective on this work. You need an elevation. And I love that Hong Kong has a strong precedent for working in malls and public spaces. I mean, K11 has set the bar quite high. And I love, though, Swire Properties offered us Pacific Place. And Pacific Place, for me, that intersection of Wan Chai and Central is iconic. That mall is one of the first kind of significant meeting place malls in this city. I love where the MRT comes in. I love that it's 24/7. And we did a secret inflation again of the Tut, and Awol and I were on the Zooms in February this year, January this year, and you could just see its eyes coming through the MRT at 3 in the morning. And it felt like the perfect place for this work to find form, because again, we didn't know what audiences would be like, right? I was still wearing, when I came here in October, November, and February, masks, QR codes, all those things. And we didn't know whether we would have limits on numbers. Would people be able to come? So we wanted something in public that would be able to be encountered 24/7. And that feeling that when you kind of walk into a space and you see something unexpected and you kind of nervously laugh, like, am I in or out on the joke? Like, am I, what is this exactly? And what should I be seeing or reading? And thank you, Awol, for this incredible work, Gravity. You and I were installing through the night as the sun rose last Wednesday night. And how do you feel seeing gravity finding form here in Hong Kong? And what was the work that you imagined? In 2018, you did a show here in Hong Kong, Slow Burn. You made this work for here, and now you're finally realizing this work, both the King Tut itself as the inflatable, but also the installation inside.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I'm so happy to be on this panel with everyone, and such an amazing array of works and practices. And I feel like, in a way, like we're all in conversation on this like global scale, you know. And my work has always been about that. I like to sort of render myself invisible in the work that I make, especially as I mature as an artist. And as you mentioned, you know, this idea for the inflatable sort of came about in 2018. We couldn't show it then. We couldn't show it in 2020. And so when I was told that, you know, Hong Kong was going to open up in 2023 and that, you know, this was an opportunity, and look, to be honest, like I didn't know like what the context of you know the mall was going to do to this work, because I take it very seriously, and as you know, because it's already inflatable and it's, you know, just the material of it, the context for me had to be very very tight and very clear about my intentions. But I think ultimately it was the ideal place, right? Like it's just one of those things that the universe just kind of aligns, and then it worked perfectly, because this is probably the only time and probably the only space that can, you know, facilitate different levels of viewing, right? You have the sort of top view, you have the eye level, and then you could always experience it from the bottom, where you can also go inside the arc and get, you know, what I consider the sort of intellectual aspect of the installation. So, and again, like the sort of encountering it without any artistic intention, right? Or the fact that, you know, this is not in a art context, capital A, where people are coming to see art and then sort of investigating it from that perspective, as opposed to just stumbling upon it and, you know, just having that conversation with themselves and the work.
I mean, I think with this particular work, something that I loved about it when I saw it was not just how it looked from the front, but what it feels like inside. And there's this interior to the King Tut work, to Gravity, which allowed us to create an assembly together. And we did a lot of Zooms with you. And you have your studio in LA, and you know you work a lot on the floor with images and books and objects, and you bring things together through photography, through music, through installation, through sculpture. And so what's inside the King Tut is really as important as what's kind of outside.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, like the public engagement is, I think, by far the most important aspect of this work for me. You know, there's like a bit of humor with the scale as a way to entice an audience who may not be interested in art in a way that, you know, they will come to a fair to kind of experience it. But because it is in a mall and it's in such a public space and an iconic one at that, you know, I've had a few friends who've grown up here, who've told me, like, you know, they used to go hang out at this mall, and I've had malls like that in my lifetime. And so I just feel like it's such a unexpected yet appropriate place for this. And I don't know what the other iteration of this work is going to be like, because again, like that perspective shift is very important, and I think it definitely gave it a new life, you know, in terms of the installation.
I think, you know, I really loved sitting with you. We arrived, you and I, last week on Wednesday, and you went and had a walk around Kowloon, and you were looking at the streets, and you'd bought a suitcase of objects, of books, of masks, of incense, of sage sticks. And then we kind of got together, and we were sitting on the floor of Pacific Place at about 5 a.m, and we were talking about family and life, the journey of your family from Ethiopia to New York to the Bronx, where you grew up and you studied, and then you live in Los Angeles now. But your work is really informed by encounters with books, with history, with reading through time. And when we were thinking about how to make that installation, the way that audiences participate in that space, it's a chance for them to see the work from one perspective, but to then have another. Can you talk a little bit about how you layer that into your work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that process, much like, you know, all the artists here, is like somewhat intuitive, you know, like you have these sort of dispositions, interests, and I think they sort of meet at at a point where the only thing to do is to just sort of follow that, follow these leads. And, for me, the culture exchange is a big part of this project for me. I didn't want to come and just plant this thing where I know a lot of people are going to encounter it without any context. And so the books, the sort of cultural objects, the cultural artifacts that I brought, the image that you were so sort of keen on in including in the installation, which I thought was brilliant, because I think it gives the audience a context of as me as an image maker, but then also this idea of I'm an image-based artist, so yes, it's a sculpture, but ultimately people are engaging with it on a like on their phones, they're making images, they're uploading it to a server, their whatever, social media, and then also for me it's not complete yet, because I still have another layer, which is collecting all these images that people are sharing and then sort of putting it back into some sort of book or ephemera. So yeah, I think it's kind of much like the work itself, like it's grounded, but it's also this thing that can be packed away and then shipped somewhere else. And I don't know, I like this thing of we do this with our lives. We set up shop. We test things and then we move on, and I like that this work can do that, and yeah.
I think that's a good place. So look, if I'll just give you a heads up if you have. Does anyone have any questions right away? Anything you'd like to ask, or I'll go. Oh yes, good. There you go. Question.
Hello. I actually, it's just not really clear to me, why do the banks actually have to shred this money? Is it money that is not good anymore, or is it just used, or?
Yes, it's money. Normally, when a banknote, I think it has more than 30% damage, break it, for any reason. And they produce tons of this paper. But since it has metals, they still don't know how to recycle. They are burning them. They are in Spain. Each country is trying to develop there is a research about it. In Spain, I know that they are trying to make concrete with it. What I find it great. But it's still not developed.
Yeah, I think if you've ever taken, I've had torn bills in my wallet and I've tried to cash it in, and they're like, your money's no good. Yeah. So it's like the money that can't be circulated anymore. And in that way, so I think, that's also important as well, that it's not just this kind of gratuitous kind of confetti. It's actually this kind of de-accessioned.
Or, for example, the 500, the biggest, the 500 euros banknote is being now removed. Still, you can use it, but it's not because they are damaged, it's because they are removing it or because they changed the banknote. In many countries, now they are doing the polymero. It's this kind of plastic type of paper. And, of course, they change quite often.
I will say, if you look at Carlos's work, I've curated it next to an artist, Shabugi Rao, born in India, living in Singapore, with a series of 300 handmade books she's made called River of Ink, and she'll be speaking on a panel today about the Kochi Biennial, which she recently curated. But she just recently made these books by hand, which she stitched with text that she wrote, and then she dips them in water and ink to destroy them. So there are lots of processes in Encounters this year of things that have cycle of renewal, things that can only take form in this moment, but then in the moment where they disappear, they'll take form again somewhere else, but it can never be the same. Stanislava's work can never be the same. Awol's work can never be the same. Mella's work can't be the same. Trevor's work. So I love with each of these works, they're not works that you drop into space that ostensibly have the same form that can be reproduced identically, because every time they take form, they have their own unique iteration. Was there another question? I saw Stephanie moving into, yes, in the front. She's just behind you.
I would like to ask regarding the Tutankhamun, why the subject Tutankhamun was relevant for Hong Kong?
That's a good question. We had a similar question yesterday about generally like why Egypt, why these figures from Egypt. And for me, this is the cradle of civilization. I think this is where civilization sort of began. In my own practice, I've been sort of investigating this idea of what it, if you think about Egypt and like how it's sort of portrayed in you know, around the world, it's often whitewashed, and it's sort of been co-opted by everything but people of Africa. And I think people forget that Egypt is in Africa. And so for me, recontextualizing this work in an African context is very important. China has a very big presence in Africa. There's these connections that I've seen when I've visited places. So for me, it's just bringing it back to somewhere where I feel like the presence is sort of, you know, kind of swapped. And so I think there's something there that happens where, you know, it's familiar, but you're not so sort of close to it. And I wanted to bring that kind of familiarity to something. And again, it's, you know, the inflatable, the installation is one thing, but the text, you know, the books, all these like historical documents, this is why it's so important. So, you know, the inflatable itself is just merely a way to get the people to come and see the text.
I have to say I love in this work that, as Awol said, we spoke a lot on Zoom about what to include inside the King Tut, and the books he selected that came from his studio around archaeology, excavating histories and theories of sovereignty, emancipation, and how objects get reinterpreted through theft or institutions taking objects and not returning them. Ideas of repatriation are included inside the King Tut work. And there's a photograph that Awol took in 2012 of a friend, and he does a lot of portraiture. And, you know, I think it's really interesting for me, like with Mella's work, like it's not, she asked the collaborators to see her as a building. So in a sense, they're creating a series of portraits that aren't portraits. They're creating a series of images of subjects that are not exact representations. And I love in your work that we've been able to actually bring a photograph inside the King Tut of a friend of yours who 10 years ago, he looked like one way. You know, his body, he's got loaves and fishes. He was, like you, he was about 24 years old at the time that you took that image. And the Tut was this boy king. It's a complicated king, you know, and the son of Nefertiti. And you work a lot with Nefertiti in your work as well, but you also work with Greek and Egyptian and ancient mythologies and trades that circle inside of ideas of emancipation, of African history, subjectivities, and identities. And so I think the King Tut was, I love that the Tut exists in our mind only through cinema, popular culture, reading, imagination, through transmission of culture, but we can't know that civilization. We can't know the truth of Tut. And inside there's a photograph of a young man who we don't know either. And these two young men speak to each other through time. And then there's many other ways of speaking to each other through time. And I think that's something that I love in Awol's work and with each of these artists' work, with Trevor's work, you know, finding forms, the money trees in different forms, repeated through different places in time, finding a way to be together. The money trees themselves are not strong. It's the ties that bind them that actually hold the weight. And I feel in Awol's work, the thing that holds the weight is the text, the research. And he calls, you know, we talk about him being an LA-based conceptual artist, and it's about leading with the idea. And I think for Carlos, Trevor, Mella, and Stanislava, and Awol, that idea of having an idea and finding the necessary medium and form, it runs really strongly in each of their works. If that makes sense. It's a really long answer. Yeah. Is there any more questions, or are we going to liberate you to get into the fair? Just, yeah.
Don't be shy, seriously.
My question was more in regards to the institution, and as I see sort of throughout different works, I see that there is either an avoidance of or an escape of the institution, be it the institution of the museum, for instance, with the idea of the conservation of the work, right, through Trevor's work, for instance. How do you conserve a work like that in a museum or in a collection? Or, of course, with the money, what is money today, or King Tut and so forth. And I wanted to see what your ideas, it's a general question to any of you, I would guess.
I mean, I can give one quick answer while the artists prepare that answer, which is to say that for me, as the curator of this sector, I come from a non-collecting institution. And as I said before, the curators for these sectors, Giovanni is a non-collecting institution. It's a Kunsthalle. Salz is a non-collecting institution. I like it when artists lead the market. And I like it when galleries are able to support artists with a level of ambition and risk in the market that pushes and exceeds the expectation of what can be collected. And when people feel that they can encounter things that expand and surprise them and kind of alter their course and ask them to collect something that they didn't think that they would, particularly at a scale. And I really like inherent vice. That's the quote, right, for the instability of objects in collections, things that kind of fuck with perpetuity. And I do like a little bit of inherent vice, both personally and in my curatorial practice. So I don't mind works that actually provide a challenge for the institution through, feminist practices, LGBTQI practices, moving image. All these things have challenged institutional stability in terms of collection building. And we've had to find ways to reconcile and build ethical structures to support the representation of artists' intentions within and beyond their lifetimes in order to collect ethically to represent the ideas of our times. So I think that these artists, their works do take into consideration, they are all available for collecting, and they all have protocols that exist with that idea of collecting. But I don't want artists to make work where they go, I'm making this because I think it might sell. That's just like the most banal thing ever, you know? And what we need is we need galleries who feel that they have the confidence from the market to support artists to make art, and that audiences and collectors and institutions, publicly and privately, will be able to step up and take that leap of faith. And so I think, works in this sector are being collected. I like it when encounters get collected. I want to see works in collections. So I think those ideas of inherent vice aren't anti-institutional. I think they require a collaboration with the institution to think more broadly and be more ethical and more inclusive. And that's good, in my view. But maybe other people have thoughts. I don't know. That was a position. But yeah, any of the artists or any of you have anything to add to that? No, great. Okay, before we finish, I'm just going to ask you all just like one last reflection on what it's been like to be back in Hong Kong this year, and just what it is you want the audience to take away from your work before we finish. So maybe I'll begin with you, Carlos.
For me, it's the first time in Hong Kong, that is great. And to come the first time to Hong Kong, the first time to Art Basel, to do it in such a punk way, and that is funny when you were thinking about collecting. Honestly, and I am fully honest, the last thing I thought is about, we were putting a price to the piece. It was like, what do we put to this, And for me, the whole experience has been just fantastic, and I have to really thank you for making it possible, really. Chapeau.
Oh, thank you. Merci. Trevor.
Yes, and I'm here. I'm based in here. So for me, it's always. It's amazing when we were like thinking about, if there people would come to Hong Kong again because of all the things have happened. And I was in Singapore for the fair also as SG, and I saw like, oh my God, so many people go to Singapore. Will people just go to Singapore, not going to Hong Kong? And I was just like, and yeah, but I'm very happy that when we do the setup, we are the first set of people to go to the fair, and we see like, this time the fair have like 2 floors. Like people start to come in, people sending me message like, they're coming from Hong Kong. Like a lot of artists coming, like from different places, and in a way that I found, this is something that I have been missing. Like no, for myself, but at the same time, like I can represent everyone. But as an artist, and as me being an artist, I feel that kind of like the connection again in a way.
I have to say, I really wanted Hong Kong first for Art Basel this year. I wanted Encounters number 1 and 2 to be Hong Kong artists. So it's you, Trevor, and then Jaffa Lam with her largest installation to date, her 14-meter canopy, her constellation, and her trolleys that are trolleyed. And you both worked together in the same building in Fortan. And we had dim sum on Sunday before in-store began. Double chicken's feet, good collagen. And, I think it's all part of it, because both you and Jaffa, that feeling that both of you, 8 years ago, I couldn't get the Hong Kong galleries to invest in Hong Kong artists at this scale. And I'm really proud of Hong Kong and I'm really proud that international audiences and markets are finally, kind of coming to the trolley party. It's important. And Mella.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that there is space to create this work in this environment. and that is supported by ROH projects from Indonesia, to take that risk or to take that challenge to bring this work from Indonesia, which is developed so locally, to connect to the bamboo builders in Hong Kong, which of course is a good connection. But our challenge was especially, if you see the speed of how they normally build the scaffoldings from bamboo in Hong Kong, it's very fast. So, and Indonesia is quite slow. So we have to try how to work with them, that they slow down and that they work in 2 hours to build this construction. So normally they do it with the plastic strips to bind the bamboo together. And this time we asked them to do it with the hemp, so with the natural materials. So that slowed them down. And for them it was also, they learned also something new, or to go back more into the traditional way of working with the local materials. So yeah, for me this was just, the most important thing is how to connect with the local skills in Hong Kong. And this, for me, it succeeded in that sense. I'm very happy with the installation.
I love it. I was chatting to the construction workers and they were showing me the little tricky things they'd inserted. Like good emerging artists, they were just like trying things out. A little bit of editorializing. I might go to you, Awol.
Well, I think the cities, well, I think the last time I was here was maybe like 2019. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's up to pace. I was just saying that, you know, a lot happens at night here in Hong Kong, you know, and it kind of reminds me of New York. And I just mean like even people that are installing these sort of displays that we see in the morning, like it's just overnight. I mean, you and I spent, you know, most of our, like the first night we were here, just sort of, you know, watching these incredible, you know, Hong Kong locals sort of help us, you know, build some of that structure. So I think it's beautiful. I think the energy is amazing here. I feel like it's the best of New York. Like it has the energy of New York, and then it also has the traffic of LA. So I think it's you know, I think it means it's doing good. And I think it's only getting started. You know what I mean? But it feels so good to be back, and it's just amazing.
Well, I'm excited to see you in a few weeks in LA. I'm going to be in your studio. You've got a book coming out next month, so you've got to keep an eye out for that. Okay. And, you know, it's been great to have you here, and it was such a great experience, one of the best things of my life, sitting on the floor of Pacific Place at 5 a.m. going, yes.
Thank you.
You never get to do that again. Never have I ever.
Right.
And then, Stan, we'll finish with you.
So like Awol, I haven't been here since 2019, and what I was so touched actually with my work specifically was the great interest from Asian curators and institutions, and this is my first work I ever made about Australia actually, and it reminded me that Hong Kong is it's a trading port, you know, it's a place of trade of ideas and goods and, you know, merchants and economies and so on, but it's a place of trading. And it was this really overwhelming feeling, actually, that I felt only twice after COVID. One was to see Alexie curate Venice, and here, which was kind of coming into a place and just going, you know, this is all complicated, you know. Hong Kong is complicated, COVID is complicated, museums are complicated, fairs are complicated, but this shit is my religion, you know, and art is my religion. And you come into these places, and for all there is to say about everything, to see this much art, this many ideas, to trade this many things, ways of seeing, ways of living, ways of interpreting, ways of uncovering, that's it. It's just it. You know, there's nothing better.
We're going to finish there before I cry. You know, please just give these artists a round of applause for being amazing.